Carlos Nelson with Cascade Sports. And today we're doing a joint broadcast with Michael Coleman, host of Word Is.
Word is.
And he's really giving you the 411 on quite a few things. And he's got a special guest coming on today, Dr. Thabiti Lewis. But before his guest comes on, we've had a death in the sports family of an iconic Hall of Fame coach, Coach Jack Bush, and we're going to talk about Coach Bush for a minute. Mike, how you doing this morning?
Doing well, man. Doing well. And condolences to the Bush family and the community. Because, if there are a lot of, there are times where certain coaches have that it factor, that surpasses what they do on the court. But it's what they do and add to the community, the flavor of it. Because let's face it, you don't be around as long as he has and don't have a bunch of other kids in terms of your players that you've had. He's coached the sons of former players, probably maybe to a degree some younger grandfathers who 3 generations worth. So you got a guy like that, when he passes away, the legacy will not go away because there's too many folks out there that will keep his name uplifted.
Yeah, he brought in a whole era of coaching for blacks. I know a little bit about Coach Bush. I've been here since '78. He was a legend, really, when I came here in '78. Kansas City high school basketball was a hotbed. They were producing stars like Anthony Peeler, former Lakers, and I came here. They have the field house. I wanted to go to the club. I'm still young. I'm like 25, 20. Hey, let's go to the club. I'm coming here from DC and New York. They was like, club, we going to the field house. Paseo is facing off against Central. And you didn't get there. Game started at 6. You didn't get there at possibly 4:45, 5 o'clock. You wasn't going to get no seat. And that was, I'm saying, tremendous. And that era of high school sports in the Kansas City public schools was an era where the public schools were playing the suburban schools, and the suburban schools were just getting really started, and they were draining the talent from the urban cores as the black population was trying to put themselves in better living conditions economically, and so forth. And so a lot of the talent that was going to schools like Central High School, where Jack Bush Sr. was coaching, he had less talent to start dealing with the Raytowns, the Raytown Souths, the Lee Summit Norths. And then on top of that, with the declining budget in public schools and the facilities that these coaches had versus these suburban schools that had 3, some of them have 4 gyms, where the urban core schools like Central, where Jack Bush coached, they had 1 gym, and that gym had to be for cheerleading, for wrestling, for volleyball, for all of their sports. And so his accomplishment of having all of these wins and what have you even is more magnified for one who's been in sports.
Well, and when you talk about the landscape, how how it changed. You know, you talked to me in one breath. You were talking about how that was the place to go. Boom, watch some ball, get there early, stay late, that whole bit, right?
Mike, what'd you say? Go early and stay late. That's how it was.
I believe it. I mean, that kind of atmosphere. How can it not be? You know, and then as the years progress and as things evolve, it's no secret. Kids on this part of town, across the tracks in some cases, are now in that shiny new building, and they're assembling the talent. They're taking people off the factory line, if you will, the frontliners. We have the same problem here in Tyler, Texas. I mean, the alma mater of Earl Campbell, Tyler High School, and versus the school across town, formerly Robert E. Lee High School, but now known as Legacy because of a name change. I'll tell you about that one day. But a lot of that talent is being drained from the alma mater of the great Earl Campbell to go across town. And as a result, what used to be the powerhouse, which I think you were alluding to, what used to be the powerhouse, you don't have the numbers anymore.
A shadow of themselves.
A shadow of themselves. All they have to live by right now is what they used to be, and they're trying to get back to that bar level.
Like to segue in to your guest, Dr. Thabiti Lewis. Hey, Dr. Lewis, welcome to the show. We were talking about a legendary coach, basketball coach, Jack Bush. He's in the Hall of Fame. And I was talking to Mike, and I said, boy, this is perfect for Dr. Lewis to segue into, because Dr. Lewis wrote Ballers of the New School. And Ballers of the New School, from where I sit, coaches like Jack Bush, that is a Hall of Famer, were coaching some of those ballers of the new school. He was coaching like from the early 70s until, Mike, do you have when he retired?
Probably late 90s, I think.
90s, and he produced, he had the hit factory at Central High School. What do you have to say, Thabiti, about these type coaches in that era of coaching? What we were talking about, that's when the suburban schools were being formed, especially here in Kansas City, and it was draining the talent from the powerhouse urban core schools. And I think that was taking place around the country.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm from St. Louis, and Kansas City, Missouri, and it's part of the Missouri State Championships. And so I think they always played what was the powerhouse there? Something Rockhurst or
Rockhurst,
yeah. Would always be in football or basketball finals somehow.
Right.
But I imagine it's a really big school, if I'm not mistaken, right? And suburban, right? So you mentioned this national trend around the suburban schools via DSEG, basically stripping talent from the public cores. Is absolutely correct. And I think basketball is a great example. So in St. Louis, when I was going through school, the St. Louis Public High School League, the PHL, was a powerhouse. And 1 year in the state championship, or a couple of years, but 1 year in particular, 3 teams from the PHL made it to the Final Four for the state of Missouri. So it shows you the vast amount of talent that existed in these spaces. And routinely, the top teams would be paired against one another at some early point in the districts to eliminate one another. And somehow this 1 year, Beaumont High School, which was led by a guy who should have made it to the pros, Craig Upchurch. I grew up with this guy. He ended up going to the University of Houston. just had grade problems, but he was before his time. 6'7", handled the ball, shooting from outside. And I remember saying, "What are you doing? Go down low." But he understood he was evolving to another era. But so, that would happen routinely. And I think you both may be aware of Floyd Irons and the Vashon High School machine. And so Floyd routinely fought these battles and, against the state of Missouri. And they did everything to undermine this man and his legacy. So, I think Floyd falls into the Jack Bush category from the standpoint of just, really cultivating the talent in these spaces and creating, really powerful engines, if you will, of teams and talent. And
I'll tell you what, I think another avenue of that is AAU. They are so huge out there in terms of, their players look to them before they look to dad in terms of where should I go to school, because the coach knows if I steer him to KU, if I steer him to Missouri, I get something out of it. And I think they have way too much influence on young men today because their high school coaches don't even get that kind of power with them. Used to be the high school coach could guide you the direction of where to go depending on the folks who are interested in you. But nowadays, if there's a shoe deal involved for an AAU coach or whatever perk they may get for delivering, that sensational player, that phenom, that's the route it's going. And,
hey, Mike, I want to interject because you know how even on our business deals, I'm always talking about my personal experience.
Right.
That's how I go by. And you 100% right. When I came out running track in 69, I had scholarships to Brown, to Syracuse. My coach told me, you won't last 2 seconds there. And that was an era where you had semi-black student unions.
Right.
He sent me down to Virginia State. I'm a homeboy. You need to go to an HBCU. You will not get no degree at those other schools because you're not going to mix. And go ahead.
No, Carlos, no, go ahead and finish because you made me think about something that's so important. Go ahead and finish.
The bottom line is what Mike said. Mike said AAU versus coaches like Jack Bush, that your coach said, this is where you going, at least in my experience. And that's where you went. That's where mama told you to go. Because coach like Bush knew parents. Parents knew him. And it's like, this is going to be, they're showing you this shiny object here, but John is not going to work well in that environment. Go, Thabiti.
Yeah, so two things. One, I think about guys like Bubba Smith and these other cats who, could not play in the South, in the SEC. And they saw them as trailblazers, going to spaces like Michigan State, et cetera. Yep. Bubba was like, I got out here and snow. I've never seen snow, and I miss my mama cornbread, and you know what I'm saying? So you have this, the point is, this huge, sort of cultural vacuum when you going into these spaces, right? Which, it's okay because on one hand, because there's an opportunity to sort of evolve, to widen one spectrum. But the other side is that, I think just by the nature of Black people being in America, we're always not even by choice, but by necessity, forced to have a stronger degree of sort of intercultural competency. We have some sense of, coexisting, getting along with, understanding white folks. And it's not mutual. And so usually the conflict is when you're saying, okay, yeah, we're going to get together and come together, but it's got to be an even exchange. And so I'm listening to you, Carlos, and two things are coming to my mind. So first is just the irony of the SEC being this sort of powerhouse football division when it turned its nose up at, African Americans. And so part of me says, just, you know, damn them, don't go there, right? But of course, can you imagine, you know, we've got the economics around this. So, you know, just like the young brother, I can't remember his name, who's a top recruit who went to Howard for basketball.
Yeah.
If that kind of trend continues, all of a sudden, no rules will change, but they'll be adhered to. And suddenly you'll see 1 million violations. Suppose if the HBCUs get all these guys. Right?
Hadn't looked at it like that.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike.
Well, listen.
Mike, hold on.
To Mr. Lewis's point.
Mike, hold on just 1 minute. Stop the show. Mike, I told you before Dr. Lewis came on. Now, I told you how egg-headed she was, right?
Right.
You know, I said he was an intellectual. Honestly, Mike, did you look at that from that point of view?
Well, actually, I maybe not the way that he did, but the correlation is this. You know, Deion Sanders is like 2.5 hours east of here, 3 hours east of here. Jackson, Mississippi. You know, Jackson State is head coach. Few guys from the SEC have decided they want to transfer there. His son's going to go there. But it was mighty odd that not even weeks, but not long after it was announced that Deion was about to be their head coach, boom. Whatever happened prior to him being there, they were hit with a bunch of NCAA violations.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all do your homework.
Because this is where the money is. And we cannot let Black schools become the major money generators, because then those educational institutions actually have the revenue to offer the educational resources to educate even more of these, you know, young Black students, and increase the I think it's a high quality anyway, but you know, with the resources academically, etc. Go ahead. I'm sorry,
and
Mike.
also the enticement of, if you're an athlete, somewhere on TV every week.
Yep.
You go to Jackson State, you go to, well, I can't say Grambling, because Grambling kind of did its own thing. They were kind of the forerunner of doing some real positive things, but the majority of the HBCUs didn't have a contract or TV wise, but now everybody's on TV.
Right.
HBCUs,
hey, Mike.
You can't use that as an argument.
Mike, and Dr. Lewis, see, you asked me how long I've been knowing Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis knew me when we were just starting Cascade Sports and this company. And as you say, that everybody's on TV, that's what our goal is. We are a Black company that cover more than sports, that has credibility. As these trends move forward, we're putting ourselves in position to be the internet company that covers HBCUs. You already see that we have HBCU channel where we're doing hour-long interviews with some of the top HBCU coaches. And that's why we talked about this company before you came on the air, Dr. Lewis. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but why haven't we had a company like Cascade Media Group out here covering Black events and sports and such? And there are people that have all the money in the world, but this hasn't happened because it's dangerous for Black people to come together. And this digital format makes it much easier for people like yourself and myself to see how you can skin the cat a different way.
Hey, Carlos, I wanted to go back to something quickly about HBCUs. So in Bill Rhoden's $40 million slaves, he talks about the legacy of historically Black colleges. And he talks about himself playing at Morgan State and, you know, the sort of powerhouses. And, you know, Bill and I have had, you know, live debates and conversations, and he's against players being paid. And I understand why, because in college, because, you know, he feels that, you know, they should get a strong education, and that's the trade-off. And he admits it has evolved and changed. It's not the same way it used to be. But then he came up with you know, we had this debate. Then he wrote a piece after, you know, not maybe within a year after this, about, well, okay, if they're going to bring Carlos, let's pay for his posse, that they get a free, you know, his friends from home, so that there's a, you know, that commitment. If not giving him money, it is a greater contribute, you know, it's a greater payoff, that if Carlos and four of his friends also get a scholarship, then not only does the community he comes from become more enriched, but also he's going to have this support mechanism, right? And so it's doing something of what LeBron has done himself, right, around him and his friends. But my point with the HBCU dynamic is, you know, there's a great book that looks at the history of historically Black colleges and Hall of Fame, and players who made it to the Hall of Fame. And that list is long, particularly the early players throughout the 60s and 70s, once, you know, football, you know, pro football began this sort of integration. And what you see is that these Black coaches, just like...
This program is brought to you by the City of Fountains Coaches Association.